to me, I get my powers from the ocean. My creative powers. It's like it's where I come up with ideas when I have problems, when I am extremely stressed out, when I can't figure out the answer to something. It's where I go to figure out, to get clarity, to figure it out.
Hey folks, welcome to the latest episode of the Ecosystem Member Podcast. We are stoked to have you and grateful you are taking the time to listen. Our guest this week really blew me away. I've talked to a lot of interesting folks who are doing amazing work on environmental responsibility, both on this podcast and my other podcast, You Can't Eat Money. But I don't think I've had someone on who is as thoughtful and genuine as our guest for this episode. John Moore is the creative director and co-founder of environmentally responsible clothing brand Outerknown. If you haven't heard of John, you've probably heard of his co-founder Kelly Slater, widely considered to be the greatest surfer of all time. A decade or so ago, as John recounts in this episode, Kelly asked the earliest members of the Outerknown team if they had really thought about their clothes and where they come from. Despite many doubters, including one very high-profile fashion industry executive, about the relevance of sustainability in clothing, Outerknown has been built on it since day one. As you'll find out in this episode, John was the perfect person to bring this to life. With 30 years of experience in the apparel industry, including being one of GQ's Menswear Designers of the Year in 2014, as well as a host of other creative projects, John was open-minded and connected enough to the natural world to unlearn some of the fashion industry's worst tendencies. And a lot of that inspiration, as you'll hear, comes from his time growing up in the valleys of Southern California and spending time in the surf lineup near his home in Venice Beach. If you listen to this podcast and care about wild spaces and the natural world, you probably know about the worst of the fashion industry. If you want to get the dirty details, I highly recommend checking out the book Unraveled by Maxine Beda, but I only tell you that so you can understand just how important and impressive the work Outerknown is doing to track its entire supply chain and drive responsible innovation for people and planet, as John puts it in the episode. Huge thanks to John for taking time to chat, and I really appreciate him sharing his deep relationship with nature and how that informs his work at Outerknown. I hope you enjoy this episode, and if you do, please leave us a positive rating on your favorite podcast platform and share the episode with anyone who might be keen to have a more considered closet. Without further delay, here's the latest episode of the Ecosystem Member Podcast with John Moore, creative director and co-founder of the sustainable clothing brand Outerknown. Today on the Ecosystem Member Podcast, we have John Moore, the creative director and co-founder of Outerknown. Thanks for joining us today, John.
Thanks, Rick.
As the creative lead of one of the most environmentally responsible clothing brands on the planet, how do you describe your personal relationship with nature?
Wow. I start every day in the ocean. So, I think that's probably the best place to start with the conversation. I wake up early naturally, and I always go to the sea. I feel like it's a place that I've always felt most comfortable. I consider myself very lucky to have always lived close enough to the ocean to have that opportunity. It grounds me, it cleanses me. It's a place where I'm able to do my best thinking. When I paddle out at first light, I'm usually the first one in the water, and I'm either alone for an hour or I'm surfing with two or three other people. And so it's really peaceful, and you really feel one with nature, and you feel just connected to this much larger thing that's everywhere, that's global. But this is my space. And so, that's been a consistent for me more or less my whole life, but I really prioritize it as an adult with all the other chaotic schedules and busyness and deadlines. It's the one thing that I make sure I prioritize almost daily.
That's awesome. And it's been a consistent theme throughout some of our guests who have talked about the connection between surfers and the environment. Why do you think surfers, have such a special and unique connection with the earth through the ocean?
Well, I think naturally being out there, I mentioned this, but you realize you're a part of this much bigger thing. And I grew up surrounded by nature, so it wasn't just the ocean. I grew up in this little slice of the hills between like Ventura County and Malibu. And, as a kid, the hills were my backyard. And, it was a similar feeling of just being out there and being in tune with the birds and the clouds. And I can at any time of day tell you what time it is just by, the where the light is in the sky, or even what season it is by, the elevation of the light in the sky, or when the sun rises or when the sun sets. And so, I think just from that earliest age, having those places to go, it just really, you start noticing what we're doing to those places so quickly because you're there every day. And for me, I live in a very urban coastal environment. So I live in Venice Beach, and you can imagine how packed those beaches get and how littered those beaches get. And so, you can't help but kind of see, to me, it's like a barometer of culture at large, like what's happening on the beach, what's happening on my hikes through the local mountains. I I feel it with every nerve in my body. And it's just, I think we, being surfers, we have to be environmentalists. We have to think about how to live in more harmony with these elements. And I don't think all surfers do it, to be perfectly honest with you. I think I'm glad to hear it's a common thread on your podcast, and I do speak to a lot of people that think this way. But I also, it tends to be a selfish sport. You don't have a lot of time. You're in and out of the water. And I don't know if everyone thinks this way, but I do. For me, it's always been that place I go that keeps me in tune with the world and with I listen to the wind. I watch the light. Not every morning is spectacular out there, which is, I think, everyone's always like, oh, it's amazing you start your day like that. Maybe 3 to 5 mornings a year are just spectacular. The low clouds and pristine glassy conditions, and the sun's reflecting off the bottom of the clouds, and it's just the whole sky is lit up, and you're just like, you've never seen anything more beautiful. And to be a part of those are so memorable. And I'll think about that, and I'll take that with me. It'll last for days. There's other mornings where the wind's on it early and it's on shore, and it's messy, and maybe it's crowded early or something. And it's just, like, what I'm saying is, you kind of learn how to go with the flow. You just learn how to roll with it. But you also realize that we're all connected, everything. Like, I feel like from my little place in the lineup in Los Angeles, I'm connected to you in the UK and everyone else, because like we're all part of this big thing. And like, when we push or pull on something, it affects everything else. To me, it's just it's impossible to ignore it. And I'm very thankful for it. I couldn't imagine. To me, I get my powers from the ocean, my creative powers. It's like it's where I come up with ideas when I have problems, when I am extremely stressed out, when I can't figure out the answer to something. It's where I go to figure out, to get clarity, to figure it out. So in that sense, I'm also extremely in debt to the sea and to nature in general. And so I feel a responsibility to protect it at all costs. Yeah, that's kind of how I see it. A place that brings me so much joy and inspiration. I need to give it back.
That's beautiful. So you have this role as the creative lead and the co-founder at Outerknown, which is, has so much heritage in the ocean and the sea with your co-founder, Kelly Slater. That release, that space that you get from the ocean, that connection to the surf culture, that understanding in what you see every day, in the ocean, and like you mentioned, some of the waste and the way that we treat it, in a negative way sometimes. So how does that inform the work you do at Outerknown?
There's so many things that lead up to that question. I mean, I've said it so many times over the years, but I'm a lifer in the apparel industry. So surfing's been a consistent thread for me throughout the decades, but I've also worked in the fashion industry now for 30 years. Part of like my ability to navigate Outerknown creatively comes from this moral compass that was derived from years of experiencing our impact on the front lines of fashion. I'm at the same time connected to nature. Like I was talking about, that's tends to be where so many of the ideas come from and clarity comes from. But there's this conflict of the reality of what our industry, the impact our industry has had historically. And so, for me, it's like trying to find the balance across those two always is so important. You can't unsee what you've seen firsthand. I'm a very sensitive person, and I think a lot of creatives are. And so, telling you how my feelings sort of like move with the patterns in the ocean and the weather, same thing happens in fashion. And so, I know like from our earliest days, I remember getting on a phone call with Kelly. It honestly might have been our first official meeting with Outerknown. It was the two of us and two other partners, and we were all in separate parts of the world. But he asked the question, have you guys ever thought about what are we wearing and where is it coming from? Sounds obvious now. 10 years later, it's kind of like everyone's thinking about being more transparent. But at the time, it wasn't a question that was asked of me ever as a as a designer, as a creative director, as a creative partner for brands. Like the conversation was always, how quickly can we bring this to life? How big do you think this can be? How fast can we make this? How affordable can we make this? So I knew this was going to be really different. That was this critical time in really creating a foundation that was unbreakable. I mean, we used to say we may or may not be successful, but we are going to do everything possible to go further than anyone else has ever gone before in our commitment to sustainability. So when you ask me about just how do I apply it creatively, I mean, I know this sounds crazy to say, but I used to talk a lot about the challenges and the difficulties. But for me, making the right choices for people on planet now, it feels like business is normal. It feels like the back of my hand, like breathing. It doesn't mean it's easy. I'm not saying that. It just means that it's become a fundamental building block to everything that we do. And it means that we wouldn't do it any other way. We'll never compromise. So, there's a lot of things that we can't do as a brand, and that's okay. We don't need to be everything to everybody. What we do, I'd like to believe we do extremely well. And our customers can sleep good at night knowing that we went the extra mile to use the preferred fibers, to not use any harmful chemicals, and to make sure we're treating our workforce with the utmost regard. As a designer, as a creative, it's another building block. And when you come into each day, knowing that this is the way that we do it, you figure out how to come up with the solutions on the way to bring the vision to life.
And you have quite the pedigree. I won't make you list off some of these names, but one of GQ's menswear designers of the year, I think in 2014, you essentially created the brand Hollister while working for Abercrombie and Fitch, Modern Amusement. And I read that you were at a dinner, I think, with Mickey Drexler, the former CEO of Gap and J. Crew, and he told you that nobody cares about sustainability.
Yeah.
So now that you've been on this Outerknown journey,
Yeah.
Do you think that's true?
I think at the time, this goes back 10 years ago, and yes, I was there, Kelly was there. At the time, sustainability wasn't the word it is today. And, he was making a point coming from where he sat. He was still a part of the world of J. Crew. And, I think I don't believe it, Rick, is the short answer. I mean, it wasn't just Mickey. Everyone in Kelly and my professional sphere thought we were nuts. it's going to cost too much money. It's going to be too hard. You're not going to be able to figure it out. Just put Kelly's name on t-shirts, sell it for the best possible price, and, trade off the celebrity of the greatest surfer of all time. Yeah. Uh, that might have been the path some would have taken. That was definitely not the path Kelly wanted to take. That would not have been something I would have signed up for. So, like I said, we knew we were setting out to do something different. We've always said we wanted to smash the formula, smash the traditional formulas of everything we had learned and known before. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but I'm glad they said that. Honestly, I'm glad Mickey said that. That was wind in our sails, and it propelled us to figure it out. It was shortly thereafter that Kelly and I and Todd Glazer, a wonderful photographer who documented much of the earliest days of our brand, we went to Slovenia to figure out what something called Outerknown was all about. This regenerative nylon 6 fiber that came from fishing nets and the outcasts of furniture moldings and industrial carpeting, and like Kelly Slater in Slovenia. I had never been there. I couldn't have pointed to a map and told you where it was before, but like going to these places to see with our own eyes to figure out, like, is there a better way to do things? We didn't know. We were learning on the job. There wasn't a playbook for sustainability. But I said no one used the word back then. Now it seems like it's overused. I'm glad it's something everyone talks about. I'm not sure everyone understands it. For me, I tend to use the word responsible innovation, and we try to, at every touch point, incorporate as much responsible innovation as possible. But I'm thankful for Mickey questioning our vision,
I love that. You
and
using
everybody
it.
else who doubted us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. So, coming from the creative side, I think a lot of that conversation around sustainability, responsible innovation seems to come at it from the materials side. So, as a creative lead, how does that conversation impact your work and the ideas you're trying to bring to life through Outerknown?
Well, great question. There's a lot of layers to it. We move a lot slower. It's a reality of, we have to be much more methodical with everything we do. We have to vet every supplier much more thoroughly. So, I said earlier, we can't do everything, and that's okay. I was just on a supplier trip, a 2-week trip to Portugal and Italy. And every single day we went to a different supplier. These were manufacturers, they were mills, they were spinners, they were intake centers for recycled materials. On day 5 or 6 of our tours, I think we were in Prato, Italy, and one of our hosts was taking us on the specific day. He took us to 4 different places that he partners up with to make the recycled yarns that are going into our sweaters. I felt this overwhelming sense of gratitude for what I was experiencing firsthand, the people, the process. As I walked through the sorting facility, there were 4 gentlemen sitting on the floor, meticulously sorting these small scraps of recycled fabrics into color stories. So those color stories could be bunched up to be recycled to create similar color new fibers without having to use dyes. And like nature, this whole idea was playing out before my eyes, like how it's not just me in the water in the morning, or it's not just Outerknown's ability to tell this story through our website or through our retail experience. It's like all of these small pieces are connected to bring this to life, down to the smallest little scraps and fibers to bring this responsible innovation to life. And so that was so powerful to me. Yes, at the end of the day, Outerknown gets to tell these amazing stories. And that's a big part of the lifeblood of creating the energy that we do in marketing and getting the word out there. But it wouldn't be possible without the supply network. And so we used to move really fast. Anything else I did before, you mentioned a lot of those other projects. I mean, it was always moving fast, cutting corners, doing things as affordable as possible to protect the biggest possible margin for the brand. And this is so much different. I get this rush when I get to visit some of these suppliers and I get to see firsthand what they're doing with all of this innovation and discover a fabric that previously I couldn't find. So this happened on this trip to Prato. Like we were in this, it was a facility called Manteca, and we were up in their material innovation lab, and I had been looking for these materials for women's, and just to see, I had already done some of these tours, so I understood what was going into the smallest details that was going into making this fabric that I had been looking for 10 years. But then I found it, and that to me was worth the extra time and the discipline and everything that it takes to get there. So that's not an everyday thing here, but when it happens, it's really beautiful. It's inspiring, and it's we might only be able to put a few of those things out a season, but we're very proud to.
I love that. And we'll end here with a little bit of advice. So you have, as you said, 30 years of experience in the apparel industry. You worked in different elements of it, from your time with Hollister to now at Outerknown. If someone's thinking about how they want to start building a more environmentally responsible wardrobe, what advice would you have for them?
I love this question. I'll just answer it very personally. Don't throw anything out. Let's start there. The most responsible items of clothing you have is what you already own. And I wear a lot of Outerknown. I also wear a lot of vintage. I cherish my vintage. And when you buy less, buy better, buy used, repair your stuff, like, you hear that all the time. It's true. Stay away from trends, lean into timeless heirloom items, versatile items built to last. And when you have something that works for you, go with it. It's most important that we feel comfortable in our clothes. And so, I just think, yeah, someone asked me that question the other day, and I think they were ready to just like clean out their whole closet and replace it with Outerknown. We'd love to have the support, but don't throw out your stuff. Recycle it. Put it back into the supply chain. There's so much innovation now around recycling cottons and synthetics, and even taking apart blends to recycle in their own respective ways. But I think what we need to do now as a culture is use what we have, keep things in circulation, and buy smart. Do you really need it? Like buy products that are built to last, whether it's from us or from someone else. To me, sustainability is just one of those really critical inherent benchmarks of quality. So yes, we're very thankful if you come to us, but like, just buy from other brands that are thinking like us and augment it with your favorite products that are already in your closet, and buy recycled and vintage whenever possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the advice, and thanks so much for the time, John. I really appreciate it, and I definitely encourage everyone to check out Outerknown.
Yeah, thanks, Rick.